Is there more to the introduction than that?
Nope, you could start. There's nobody in the audience, so I don't need to talk about how they could submit questions.
Okay, great. All right, I'd like to call to order the meeting, the June 18th, 2020 meeting of the Park Ridge Park District Board of Commissioners. It is 7:03 p.m. Please call the roll.
Okay, I just want to say that it's Thursday, June 18th, 2020. Roll call is Commissioner Grau?
Here.
Commissioner Harrington?
Here.
Commissioner LeDuc?
Here.
Commissioner Leach?
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Here.
Commissioner Tunnell?
Here.
Commissioner Coyne?
Here. Does anybody have any amendments, additions, or deletions to for the agenda today? No? Hearing none. Well, yeah, I muted myself. I twitched. Sorry. I now open it up to public comment on non-agenda items. Okay.
Hi, my name is Andrea Klein, and I live at 1120 North Lincoln. My kids have swam for the Neptunes at the Laddup YMCA for the last 4 years, and I am a coach. The Neptune swim team has been around for over 60 years, and we currently have over 100 swimmers with over 30 swimmers in the Park Ridge Park District service area. As you may have heard, the Laddup YMCA will not be reopening. I come here tonight on behalf of the Neptunes to ask to rent pool space from the Park Ridge Park District in Phase 4. Our swimmers miss being in the water. They miss their friends. We've had different activities during the pandemic for them, including dry land. We did a scavenger hunt with prizes. So we've done some Zoom calls. We have seen each other, and they're really anxious to get back together and to swim. It's really interesting watching, and I'm sure this is true for other sports teams too, but watching the bond that these swimmers have, and it transcends schools and transcends towns, and they're really missing their pool. So we would ask you on behalf of the Neptunes if you would please consider renting the Neptunes some pool space. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know, I'm kind of new at this gig. Do we have, is it time where commissioners or staff can comment on it, or we just let the comment go and then we take it under advisement? Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure I was doing a proper protocol.
It's hard, but those are protocol. But thank you, Andrea.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. Okay, I move to approve the regular and annual board meeting minutes of Thursday, May 21st, 2020, and the special board meeting minutes of Tuesday, June 9th, 2020. This action will be formally ratified at an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date.
Second.
Commissioner O'Donnell, second. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington?
Yes.
Commissioner LeDuc?
Yes.
Commissioner Leach?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to reports from park officials. We start off with the president. Mine is short. I don't have a report. I will turn it right over to our attorney, Dirk Price, if he's in attendance and has anything to report.
Scott Puma is with us tonight. I'm
Oh.
not sure if he's signed in.
He's not signed in right now.
Okay.
So then we can skip that for now, I guess, and go right to your report, Executive
Yep.
Director Mountcastle.
Sure. If he joins us and has anything, but I am not aware of anything that the attorney has this evening. So I will start with the COVID-19 update for up to the meeting time today. I just wanted to start out by thanking Sandra DeAngelis, Superintendent DeAngelis, for updating the financial modeling, and she'll get into that in her finance report this evening. But if you examined it, there's a few factors that are contributing to a better than projected scenario. I want to say at this point in time, as we said, this will change, monthly, daily, as we go through these different phases. Wanted to talk a little about phase 3, which is the phase we're in right now. We have outdoor fitness and the Centennial Indoor Lap Swim and Therapy Pool that started and opened this past Monday. And Superintendent Armour will go into, some of the tenants and program revenues, but it is going very well. Of course, the rink, the driving range, the batting cage, and all outdoor amenities, except for the drinking fountains, playgrounds, and splash pad are now open. So we are thrilled to have facilities starting to open and see our wonderful customers come back. Currently, the playgrounds, the splash pad, and the drinking fountains are closed, and that is based on the direction from the Governor's Order 2020-38. Specifically called out our playgrounds and drinking fountains. They consider playgrounds as an amusement facility and not an outdoor amenity, causing much confusion not only in our community, but many communities across the state, and I would imagine in other states. The maintenance staff has gone out and I know they were reinstalling some caution tape this week, as we're seeing a lot of use on the playgrounds. And so I would just continue to remind people that those playgrounds, unfortunately, do remain closed. The cleaning protocols set at the facilities that are open are going well. I know staff is making adjustments as needed, but there's extensive training going on and stressing the importance of this new protocol. Signage continues to be developed each time we open a facility, and those are pretty, there's a lot of proofs going around on those signs because of the wording and, correlating it and looking at the Governor's Order to make sure that we're getting the wording correct and the instructions from the CDC. The other thing going on in the parks is we're seeing, and not surprising, we're seeing a lot of private, or I shouldn't say a lot, but we're seeing private groups and instruction going on in the parks. And I just want to remind the board and the community that this is unauthorized due to our ordinance, that's section 2.08 of the ordinance, which is commercial sale, exhibition, or distribution of goods or services. However, if we receive requests, we are considering, if it's a field rental, we're dealing with one now. We're dealing with one under the field rental policy that we would charge, if we have the field space and it falls within that policy. And then also the special event permit license, if it's a short-term use, which I'm considering these events, because this is an unprecedented time. This is not something we would authorize at all times because of the competition factor, but we certainly have room right now in the parks, and so we are considering those on a one-by-one basis. And again, it's a part of our ordinance manual in terms of competition, that people cannot sell or collect money or provide services for a fee. So that's one thing we're running into. Nothing serious. So everybody wants to get out and use the parks. Moving into phase 4, which we hope to, we do not know when we're going to move into phase 4, but as the governor has announced the state of Illinois seems to be on a good path to be moving into phase 4, which could be as early as June 26th, which is next week. The board at our last meeting approved the fitness center, Hinckley Pool, to open, and additionally, the splash pad, which is currently not under the approvable guidelines, but if that comes out in phase 4 that we are allowed to open the splash pad, we are also preparing the splash pad for opening. We did see a draft, what we believe is a draft of some of the guidelines for stage 4 for fitness and youth sports on the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity website. They've since pulled it down, but we are reviewing that. It states, you know, more detail on the groups of 50, but that's the premise that we are working off of when we're making our plans for opening those next facilities, is groups of 50 people with all sorts of restrictions in terms of social distancing and, you know, different spaces between the different groups. So we'll continue to look out for that final copy of that document. The majority of the full-time staff has returned to work. There are several, not several, but there's a handful that are performing different roles, meaning the front lines at the batting cages and the driving range, and some even in the maintenance department where their role is something different typically. They're going to be working on the front lines of the camp and some the virtual programming. And then part-time seasonal staff is being called back when there is work, and there have been part-time people starting to be brought back as needed. In phase 4, we are going to continue that if employees can work from home, they should continue to do so. That is a preliminary guidance that we're seeing. However, our frontline staff, facility managers, maintenance staff are all back on site. And specifically the staff at Wohlers Hall and other administrative spaces such as hockey are having limited in person with remote working continuing for the most part. And then finally, preparing 2 schedules, and Superintendent Irmer can expand on this if there's questions, but the staff is currently, first of all, there's water in the pool. That's exciting. Terry sent a picture, Superintendent Wolf sent a picture before this meeting of Hinckley. So we're preparing 2 schedules for Hinckley Pool, one under the current guidelines for phase 3, which is what has been approved, and then with some projected guidelines, hoping that there will be, it will be opened up for open swim, which is the big impediment, you know, to our swimming season right now, among other things. But, you know, it's the open swim and then the numbers that are going to be allowed. So once the guards are trained and the facility is ready for the public, then we will go ahead and open, and that will be announced through our social media sites once the staff is ready for that pool to be open. Again, we await word on if the splash pads will be allowed in the next phase. So that is what I had. Is there any questions on all of that that I just reported on?
Hey, Gail, I do have a question. Are you aware of any effort by any governmental group or non-governmental group to pressure whomever is making these decisions to take the playgrounds out of phase 5? Is it?
It's phase, well, we're all hoping it's going to be phase 4 is the next phase. So we're all hoping it's going to be, you know, allowed in phase 4, but I don't know that for a fact. So the group, it would be IEPD that is our advocate, and they are, you know, talking to the governor's office.
Okay, so it could be phase 4. That would be great.
And again, yeah, it could be, could not be, right? That's about the information I have.
Okay.
Any other questions? No?
Nope.
All right. Thank you. And next is under my report, if there's no questions about the COVID-19 report. Manager Holler was going to report on a few of the themes that we're getting in the comments from the public as she handles all of that material. And I also got a letter that I've responded to, and President Coyne has gotten a letter that he's responded to as well. Mine was regarding Centennial Pool, disappointment with the Centennial Pool that wasn't open, and President Coyne's was relating to not letting non-residents in for lap swimming, and I think the pools in general.
On that theme, I'm going to talk about the pool also. Our senior swimmers have gotten together this week, and over the last 2 or 3 days, I have received 6 emails from the seniors who would like us to consider including senior swim at Hinckley Pool this summer if we're allowed to do so. Other themes that are reoccurring are around the playgrounds reopening, and then generally a lot of class and membership refunds or extensions questions, and then really some specific one-time questions about registration for a specific program. But I just wanted to specifically mention the senior swim so that they are being heard. Thank you.
And if there's any questions on their HR or marketing reports, we'd be happy to answer them at this time. And if not, then that's all I have for tonight under that subject.
Right, great. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Welcome.
Commissioner. Thank you.
That's okay.
Mike Castle.
You're welcome.
All right. Next on our agenda is finance. I turn the floor over to Commissioner Harrington. You're muted, dear. Hi.
I use Zoom all day, so go-to meetings like throwing me for a loop here with the park board. I know we have lots to cover in our finance report, so I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent DeAngelis.
Thank you, Commissioner Harrington. My written report begins on page 18 of the board packet. Can't move. In addition to the IT activities, it covers highlights of the financial reports. So if anyone has any questions, I could answer them. Otherwise, I would propose to kind of move into the monthly report by funds to kind of talk through these highlights.
I did have a question about the unemployment expense. So our expense for unemployment is going down 50%?
So the estimates and the projections.
Okay, that's good, right?
Yes, that's very good. That's part of what's driving the improved outlook. So just by way of explanation, what Commissioner Grau is referring to is that I highlighted in the projection scenarios that we've revised our unemployment expense estimates downward by 50%, reflecting relief provided by the CARES Act for governmental entities that do not pay unemployment insurance tax. We pay when so there's 2 ways to handle unemployment. You can pay unemployment tax, or if you, as a government employee, we don't do that. And then if we have, and we don't typically have a lot of unemployment, so that when we do have it, we just reimburse the state for those costs. But the CARES Act included provision for government entities that pay that way to receive a 50% reimbursement. Okay. So I also wanted to highlight the next.
Can I ask a question about that, Sandra? I'm sorry.
Certainly.
So I know this was kind of alluded to in our last meeting about some potential CARES Act funding. Do you, or I don't know if Scott has joined us, do you have any idea about when that funding is expected, or how we go about applying, or how it's going to pass through to us?
So it's not clear how it will, exactly how it will pass through, but we are billed quarterly for our unemployment expenses. So our bill we would expect for the quarter ending June, we would see in September. So we will know at that point whether the state will reduce it by that amount, or if it'll be the whole amount and we'll have to apply for the reimbursement. We'll have to, we haven't seen any, I have not seen any guidance on that just yet.
But you're sure enough to include it in our new projections that it will come
to us? These are estimates. These are estimates.
Okay.
So I am trying to track down whether or not there's a mechanism yet with our unemployment insurance consultants. So I'm waiting to hear back from them regarding that.
Okay, so an asterisk there. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. So I just wanted to highlight that the treasurer's report does continue to show sufficient liquidity. And then moving on to the monthly report by funds. The first page of the monthly report on page 23 of your packet, this shows all of the funds, and the net surplus is about 97% of budget. But this is really largely driven by our lower capital outlay expense than budgeted. And we'll kind of get into that in more detail as we talk through the projections. But that's why, you know, we show the first page has all of the funds combined, and then we break them down by fund. And I always like to point you to our operating fund, which is on page 27 of the packet. And that is where you see our decline in revenues. And if we look at the bottom line, our surplus is about 52% of the prior year and 62% of budget through the month of May. So this is really showing the impact of the shutdown. And if we back up to see, you know, what we expect, the page prior, or page 25, is the recreation fund, and that is where we see the decline in revenues that's driving this, which is offset by the general fund, where we see that our revenues have not been impacted in the same way, and our expenses, where we've been managing expenses in both funds. So those are kind of the highlights of the monthly reports, or the by fund. If anyone has questions about that before we get into the payment of vouchers and how this all relates to the projections. Okay. I think the agenda has the vouchers next.
Got it. All right. Let's move through the vouchers that Superintendent DeAngelis had sent out to the board prior. I move to approve payment vouchers in the total amount of $595,588.71. This action will be formally ratified at an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Grouse seconded. Any discussion? No. May we have the vote then, please, Mary Ann?
Sure. Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne.
Aye.
Thank you.
Now, as Superintendent DeAngelis alluded to, we wanted to get into a little bit more in depth on the COVID-19 financial projection update. I know that there had been some inquiries as well by several commissioners as far as where we stand on not only the revenue and programming side, but also on the capital side, to which I know Executive Director Mountcastle had sent forth some information to the board in anticipation of this meeting. So I'll turn it over to Superintendent DeAngelis to present the projections.
You may be muted.
Forgot to unmute myself. I apologize. My bad. So before we get into the what we've been calling the projection scenarios, where we have a couple of different cases, I thought I would start with our kind of regular budget forward-looking by month, which is how we kind of set this up. So on page 20, where's my page number? Page 28 of your packet is our regular monthly kind of projection, which is in aggregate of all of our funds. So this shows each month we update the current month, which is in the far left-hand column, for actual, and then we kind of assume that what happened already this year is going to happen going forward, and what we have projected by budget going out. So when we, in last month's report, our May projections, so this report here, again, assumes what we had budgeted. So this is not adjusted for the pandemic, the effects of the pandemic. But last month, for May, our ending fund balance under this projection was very similar to what we ended up with in actuality. So that's really good news. So our ending fund balance of 10.5 million is about what we had projected in the moderate projection scenario last month. It was it's about 175,000 better than what we were estimating for May. So that is part of why our numbers look better. We talked already about the unemployment adjustment estimate under insurance. So what I'd like to do is now move forward a few pages. Well, the next page, maybe we'll start with our graph. So again, the dotted line on the top represents what our fund balance projection was at the beginning of the year based on our budget. So now this light blue line underneath it represents the data from that projection line that we just looked at. The next two lines, the gold shows our moderate scenario and the red our stress scenario. And these, the budgeted lines are based on our cash and investments, and the projection scenarios, the red and the yellow, are based on our fund balance. And that we did that because there's a lag in when we're receiving payments, and just like what actually happened here is that we're having to do so many refunds. So I don't want to look at our cash position and work from that and then realize that we're having to pay out all of the camp revenues that, well, we're not recording them as revenues, I'm sorry, but all of the cash we receive from camp registrations that's reflected in the light blue line that we're having to pay out in refunds. So that's why we're working from the fund balance, because that's based on our realization of the revenue. The bars on this chart are showing the value of our investments compared to this fund balance. So this gives us comfort that our liquidity position will continue to be sufficient through the end of the year based on these estimates. And again, we monitor this continually, and we'll be continually making these updates. So our lines here, the gold and the red lines, have moved up a little bit. Again, we'll move now into the actual projections with all of the numbers on them. I highlighted a few items this go around. So I really kind of wanted to talk through this in a little more detail and make sure that if you have any questions that we'll cover them. So this is where in the insurance line in December and November, we have, typically our insurance is the same number every month, this 23,562. So this is our liability, our workman's comp, the insurance premium that we pay on a monthly basis. But in September and in December, these numbers are higher because we're anticipating being billed for unemployment expenses. And that's where we adjusted this, having received this new information that the CARES Act provides this reimbursement. The other adjustment that was made was to reflect when we presented these numbers last month, we had estimated all of the aquatics opening in phase 4, but we've adjusted this now to show just the assumptions for Hinckley and the splash pad. And as we get more information, if the splash pad is or isn't able to open, we can adjust this further. As we get more information on actual participation, as the numbers for June come in, we will have be able to adjust, going forward to see, how were our budget assumptions for the reopening playing out, and where should we, are we doing better, or are we, should we scale things back? And again, with programs, to the extent the revenue is not as much as anticipated, we'll also anticipate having lower program expenses. So again, I wanted to kind of look through these details. The first top section of all of these numbers are a combination of the general and the recreation funds. And I highlighted December and the total column. So you can see that underneath the total is the beginning fund balance for the recreation and general funds. And then all of the estimated revenues and expenses, which gets us to our estimated ending fund balance. So the December and the total end up the same, because that's kind of what we're predicting right now through the end of the year, before we get into our 2021 budget expectations. Then we say, okay, what is that fund balance as a percent of the total expenditure number? And that's where we're getting this 29.96. And when you multiply that by 12 months, it comes out to, I think it was 3.6 months of expenses. I remember right in my report. Yeah. So that's where we're getting that estimate of what our fund balance is as a percentage of expenditures. Now, when you move down to the bottom of the page, this I've split out the capital fund from the general and recreation funds, because the activity here really skews, and it's hard to have a good understanding of where we will be fund balance as a percentage of expenditures without splitting it out. So again, under the total column at the top, capital fund beginning fund balance, this is where we ended 2019. We're showing all the estimated revenues, and what is included here as expenses are all of the projects that we have not put on hold. This includes the Woodland project, among others. So based on that, our ending fund balance estimate is 1.9 million. And we anticipate that we will start to think about beginning our 2021 budget process, and all of the projects that have been on hold, we will look at, as we always evaluate our capital asset replacement plan, and see what fits in our projected expenses and bring our recommendations to the board. So the stress case scenario is that everything we estimated here in the first case, as far as recreation programs go, we only do half as well as we've estimated. That's really the biggest difference. The capital fund is basically the same. There's one line that makes the numbers different. That is our miscellaneous, where we do include, as part of registration, there is a $1 for residents, $5 for non-residents that is dedicated to the capital fund. And because we're assuming less programmatic activity in the stress case, that number is a little smaller. So the numbers don't match the same, but they're basically that's the only difference. That's why they're not the exact same number.
And then Sandra, the taxes is the other bigger
Oh,
ticket
yes,
item.
thank you. Thank you, Gail. That's correct. So the first case, we're estimating 85% of the second half installment taxes received, which I hope is conservative. The stress case is that we only receive 75% of budgeted taxes for that second half installment. So it's a lot, I know, and we've talked about it before, but we've kind of gone through it pretty quickly. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Superintendent DeAngelis. Does anyone have any questions on any of the stress case projections, including capital? Because I know that some commissioners have had questions about funding for some projects. The nature classroom, the Hinckley project has been brought up. I think now is a great time for commissioners and our park district staff to kind of discuss their recommendations on where we are in capital projects, postponement, and those that are moving ahead as well as part of this.
Commissioner Leach, can I ask you a question, Sandra, relative to the moderate distress case scenarios? Do they change over last meeting's number? Meaning that I think the moderate was around $2 million loss and the stress was, I think, around 3.7 million. Is it still roughly tracking the same numbers?
No, they've both changed and improved a bit because, as I mentioned, we updated the most recent month to actual for both of them, which was an improvement of about $175,000. We made the adjustments for the unemployment insurance in both scenarios as well, and we made the pool adjustments in both scenarios as well.
So where is the amount that you're projecting then at the end of the year? On what page in the deck? I'm trying to follow along.
You try the fund balance? Is that what, or the net?
I think the fund balance. So are we not? So if I understand it, so is this what you meant when you said the fund balances we're reconciling to the fund balance, not to a P&L? Like the budget? What? I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. In the past ones, you would say in this moderate and in the stress scenario, you would say, we're expecting in the moderate to have a $2 million loss. In the stress, we're expecting to have a $3.7 million. So I'm just trying to figure out where that vernacular is, just so I can.
In my written report.
Which page?
That is on page 18.
That's what I'm trying to find.
I'm sorry. That is on page 18. And it is the bullet point that starts projection scenarios.
So wait, does this say 3.5 and 4.7?
Okay, so the moderate scenario is now projecting a net deficit of 1.6 million.
There it is.
And I'm comparing that when we first put this together to try to imagine what might this pandemic bring to us. The first cut at that estimate was a 3.5 million deficit.
Okay.
And that when we look at fund balance as a percentage of expenses, we're now calculating 3.6 months compared to 2.5 months in the initial projection. And then in the stress case, the net deficit is 3.1 million after these adjustments. And that compares to the initial stress case that was 4.7 million.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
And I just want to follow up on that. So if I look at the graph that's easier for me. I like pictures. The yellow and the red lines have moved closer to the blue lines, not because of changes that you've made in your projections going out, but because of we're starting from a higher point because of the actual results of the last month. Is that correct?
It's both.
Basically, it's both.
It's both. Okay. Because we're starting higher because May was improved, and these other adjustments that we've made have helped raise them up as well.
Well, right, the unemployment and some of the other things. Those are fair. Those are realistic. But you didn't get suddenly more optimistic because we had a good month in how
No.
you figured out what we might be doing in future months.
Not yet.
Okay.
We need more data before
Right.
I would want to do that. Yeah.
I would agree with that 100%. I just wanted to make sure that you hadn't already jumped in that, and I didn't think you had, but I wanted it for the record that these projections are, everything that you've changed are things that are reasonable to change in the projections here, and not some pie in the sky idea that we had a good month, so we're going to have 12 good months.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Sandra, can you just verify something for me? The 175,000 that you mentioned, is that a combination of other factors other than the unemployment and the pool adjustment, correct? Or is that part of it?
So I don't think everyone has in front of them last month's board packet, but if you do, I could point you to what our May ending fund balance estimate was.
Maybe you should just speak, just speak to that, maybe just so we can all understand.
Yeah, it's just, in May, we had, again, these are all estimates, right? So we had zero fees, admissions, and right, and everything. Taxes, turned out actually be a little lower, but we had some other fees and admissions that we were able to record. Our total receipts projected, let me make sure I'm in the right case here. Yeah, as of May was 78,800. And let's see here, what we actually recorded for May in the was 10,700. So that was actually below, right? Because we had this negative in program fees, which is part of how the refunds are kind of cycling through the system. But our expenditure estimate for May was 776.7 thousand. That's not saying that right. 776,700. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong month. I apologize.
No, that's all right. I put you on the
April.
spot with this one.
No, that's okay. So last month for May, it was our expenses, which includes our debt service, was almost 1.2 million.
Okay.
And this is again the general and rec fund, but what we recorded was about 1 million. So that's, even though our revenues were less because our expenses were lower, the difference is about 175,000.
Perfect. I just wanted to kind of walk through that.
Sure. Did everybody understand that? I don't know. It's hard for me when I'm talking through it. Maybe I should share my screen. Would that help?
Maybe.
That'd
I think
be helpful.
that, why don't you share it? But I
Margaret,
think that.
Can I share my screen? Can everybody see my screen?
You can see lots of small numbers, but.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to blow this up here.
Because when it was 20, I could see the screen, but not so much now.
Okay.
I was able to increase it.
Oops, wrong. That's the agenda. Here we go. Now you can't see anything. I am going to make you blind. Okay, so this was last month's. So May, we were projecting this 78.8 in revenue. And can I get my thing to scroll without closing everything? Come on. Here we go. And expenses for May, and this is the May column, don't make the mistake that I did, was 1.2 million. And then our fund balance for the rec fund was projecting 7.6 million. But our actual results for May, while our revenues were lower, our expenses were lower. So our fund balance was 7.8 instead of 7.6.
Great. Thank you. I think that was helpful, at least for me.
Did that help the commissioners?
The rest of the board?
So that was really the expenses. We're kind of being conservative on estimating what our expenses are going forward, and to the extent that we're able to, control those expenses, that's kind of what the model is trying to do. We're trying to be conservative so that we know what we can absorb.
So,
We'll continue to make adjustments as we, like I said, as we see what we actually realize in participation, et cetera.
I guess we received an invitation to talk about the capital situation. So last month we had a discussion about potential other projects to put on hold and an explanation of how capital funds work. And we did not take action on any of those projects that were colored orange. But Terry was not clear if any action was going to be taken on those projects. So I'm just wondering if we could run through that exercise really quickly so we're all on the same page. I can't hear you, Gail.
Gail, you're muted, I believe.
Oops, sorry. Sandra, are you able to share that the capital list that we provided to the board with the two orange items that we did not get a chance to talk about until the very, very end of the night, the last meeting? I have it up, but I don't know how to share my screen.
I think I can find the file. Bear with me.
I have it if I can share a screen somehow, but I don't know how to do that.
I think Margaret has to give it to you. So let's see if I can.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
Stop
I
sharing
got
my
it.
webcam. Awesome.
Does everybody see that?
I can see it.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So I'll just start the conversation. So everything in yellow is what at the April meeting, what we received a consensus on from the board to postpone. So staff has the understanding that there's, we're not going to bring these, we won't do anything on any of these projects, even the amounts that are under the 25,000 spending limit, meaning that's my authority as executive director to spend 25,000. So anything in yellow, we're not coming to you, to spend anything. We were asked to take another look at this list. And so that is what we brought to the last meeting. And those are the items in orange. And those two items, the staff felt like, here are the things that we could say we could postpone. And at that time, I don't know if we were generally recommending it, but we could talk through those two items and then go from there if there's others that, the board wants to put on the table. So go ahead.
But I thought you had showed the whole slide. That postponing projects, those funds have to be used for capital.
Sorry, there's more than just two. Yeah. Oh, so you want to see that? Well,
I just think we have to think of the whole picture that the capital money is not figuring into our cash balance. Do you remember that slide?
Yeah.
So, can I just jump into for a little clarification? So It is part of our all funds, right? But as it relates to the operating funds and our calculation of months of expenditures for, what we want to maintain as our operating fund balance, it doesn't play into that. But otherwise, it does need to be spent on capital. And the only other thing I wanted to highlight is that in what Gail's showing here, the items that are not colored, those total together is what represents the capital spending in those projections, that 1.9 million.
So
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I just think part of the confusion is the wording with the orange. These are things that were for us to consider postponing, but we had no discussion about postponing any of them. And one says, yeah.
One other thing, if I could mention, is that those orange projects were not, I guess they were white before, so those are included in the projections, just so that everyone's clear. I have not taken them out because we did, like Cindy said, we didn't really get to that point in the discussion. So they're currently considered expenses in those projections.
And they were also considered in progress, right?
Two of them were. Two of them were considered in progress, and the rest of them were considered recommended in the original report. And that's part of my difficulty with understanding it, because now you have two projects, the master plan design development at and the main park at the outdoor ones that were both listed as in progress, but then switched to a possibility of postponing them.
Right.
Which I thought in our original meeting, items in progress were going to continue in progress. And I know we're bleeding over to buildings and grounds a little bit, but I think a little latitude in the agenda to try to get this rectified is probably appropriate, so we can kind of move forward.
Right. So to use your example, and you're correct, and Terry can jump in if I'm speaking incorrectly, but let's take the master plan design development. In the list from April, which is not this list, this is the list from May, it said in progress, which it was, right? So the original number, I believe, was 150,000. So we've spent 50,000 of it because we've been doing the design or the planning. Up to that point, we had spent 50, and we said, okay, if we want to stop that planning, we can now add that, because we're asked to relook at the list. We can say, okay, we could offer that up, and we're at a point we can stop the planning at this point and not spend the remainder of that project, which is the 100,000. The outdoor nature classroom, Superintendent Wolf, can you speak to that? Was that a higher number as well? And then we said, yes, we had started that already, but it wasn't on the yellow. We're not doing anything with the one we told you we were postponing, and that's, reflected in the budget projections. The yellow has all been removed. The orange has not, if that makes sense. And then Terry, the outdoor nature classroom, is that the same amount that was in the April report? I can pull it up, but.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's the same amount. We have engaged an architect for a smaller amount of money, but I did not remove that portion of it that we would be saving if we stopped the project. But it would be in the neighborhood of $50,000 that we would save if we postpone at this point. So
okay.
That project specifically is ready for us to go out to bid within the next week or so. And so if we're going to continue with that project, we would want to know on that one for sure tonight if we're going to continue on, if we think that's a good project, or if we want to postpone incurring those expenses. So, and I apologize. I'm looking at this and recalling this from our last meeting. I believe I may have inadvertently sent the wrong version of this list because I was going through and cleaning up the question marks and the terminology used, and apparently I may have grabbed a wrong file in the way. So I'm sure that's added to the confusion, and so my sincere apologies for that. Because that
So is this the correct one?
Yeah, the things like identified are correct. I think I just didn't go through and remove the question marks from the yellow ones, questioning what we're postponing. We've already identified those as postponed projects.
Gotcha.
And the concept was that we were going to identify the ones in orange as ones that we wanted to discuss and could possibly postpone because we hadn't had discussion. Those were not highlighted at the first go around with this, and those were recommended by staff. The reason that we brought any back was because the board had asked us to take a deeper dive at this and look for additional recommendations. My recommendation would not be to postpone any of these in orange, but I was asked to provide some additional possibilities, and so I have provided those.
Okay. So does that make sense to everybody now, where we're at with this orange and yellow, and you know what projects are in the budget and out of the budget projections at this point?
I think it does. I think this is a good opportunity for the board to kind of hear from the staff about, from a financial perspective, knowing that these dollars are in the capital fund, although we weren't able to transfer over anticipated dollars from the operating fund. These dollars are still in the capital fund. So to what appetite do we have to spend those capital dollars right now? To what extent do we have appropriate staffing to work on the projects? I think this is just a good opportunity for us as a board to kind of take a mid-year look in the middle of pandemic to see what our appetite is for going forward.
Sure. I'll just make we'll go through that. I would think the logical thing would be to go through the ones in orange then, if that's okay, because those are the ones we're considering. My opinion, and then I'll let the other staff speak up, but the outdoor nature classroom is something I think that I would continue on the path of. We've been talking about this project for several years. The foundation has raised, I believe it's close to $30,000 to go toward this project. And I believe it's something that we should continue. And I don't know if any of the other staff have opinion about that at this point. No?
I'm sure April has an opinion. I was going to give her the floor first, but I agree. I think this is a project that we've already put some time and energy into. I think that area and that location could certainly provide good recreational opportunities if we were to find ourselves in a similar situation now in the future. To have outdoor programming space would be a unique area for us.
I would agree with that. Sorry, I was getting my camera loaded there. I definitely agree that that's something on top of the money that's already been raised, and we already have the space that I'd like to continue with that project if possible.
And then Margaret, is my estimate of 30,000, is that about correct, or is it a different number that I'm not getting?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I appreciate that. From my perspective, I don't want to rehash each capital project, but I think you could apply. Sure. I think it's good to talk about it. I'm just saying, if you say that about a nature classroom during this time from a staff priority, it's a new amenity for us. We know we've been wanting to create this, and we've had public buy-in and lots of support for this. But I also look to a project like the JC basketball and tennis courts, something, again, outdoor, could be of great use right now as a maintenance type project. So how do we then evaluate where to spend the current dollars when we say that's already been put on the shelf, but we're going to go ahead and build a new amenity? So I guess that's where I'm having, wanting some, other of my fellow commissioners to kind of talk about how you all feel about that too. Are we going to look at all these projects in totality again and say, hey, given where we're at in the pandemic and with dollars, this is where we want our priorities to be? Or are we okay just looking at those orange? Because I think you can make arguments on either side for those projects that have become more important now, given what we're facing.
Commissioner Leach, can I speak to that?
Please do.
I 100% agree with Commissioner Harrington. I think that's the challenge I tried to raise before, and I know we've went through a lot of meetings on this. And everyone remembers certain parts of the history of why we did things, why we didn't do things relative to the staff's recommendations. But I absolutely understand and I've always respected one of our first priorities is to maintain current amenities, and JC was a perfect example. So it's not that I'm opposed to an outdoor classroom. I think it's wonderful that the foundation has raised the money. It's as much as though there's other priorities, and depending on who you're talking to, people are passionate about the others just as equally. So
Right.
I'll defer to the group how to handle this, but I do love the idea of just making sure that we do truly prioritize scarce capital, understanding that we're still at $1 million+ loss projected for the year. Thank you.
Commissioner Leduc. Well, one of the things that really differentiates the outdoor nature classroom, there's the fact that a lot of the money is already going to be covered by the fundraising. And if the Friends of the Park, for their future fundraising efforts, I think they do want to be able to show, like, look, your money will actually go somewhere. But another big difference between that and the JC is the JC project, I believe, was about 99,000 versus this would be, by the time the donations were subtracted out, this would be more like 26,000. Another factor that I think is important is that, having the Wildwood Nature classrooms is a really unique, special thing. And I don't see it so much as a completely new amenity, but as an improved expansion of an amenity that we already have. And I mean, as we've seen in April's previous reports, the Wildwood program generally continues to grow, and parents with smaller children right now are really kind of at a loss of where to put them and what to do with them and how to keep them entertained. And when we're looking at a school year that's going to be probably different than how a normal school year starts, I think the fact that we could provide this kind of outdoor classroom where you could do more of the distancing things and follow more of the rules more easily, I think would be a huge boon for the community. And not to mention, one of the other nice things about it is there will be return on investment, because they won't just be using the nature classroom for free, they'll be signing up for programming there. And that way it's going to make back a good, a portion of what it costs, and probably eventually. And when you look at the class fees and everything else, it's probably going to end up paying for itself. So to me, that's one of the things, those are some of the factors that have me say we should move forward on the nature classroom.
Thanks. I don't think that any of the boards disagreeing that it's, for all the reasons that you're talking about, it's a good investment. That's why we put it on our capital list. That's why we blessed it and approved it as a project. I think from my perspective, we've got a lot of projects on this list, and we haven't had a reprioritization discussion about, based on this staff's recommendation about how we go forward. So I'm not looking at it as tit for tat, nature classroom or JC. I'm just saying, how do we as a board now come together saying, for the next 6 months, we want to focus on these projects, given, limited staff, given what we know is some financial constraints. However, these dollars are there. I just think it's a good time to say, how many dollars do we want to spend on capital right now in the short term? And can we look at projects that maybe aren't in orange? Does it make sense to do that? Again, not disagreeing with you that there's some wonderful pluses about each project, and certainly the nature outdoor classroom has its benefits, but I think you could, each of us could make our passionate pleas for each of these projects, and did when we built this capital budget.
So I'm confused. Are we considering reprioritizing all the projects again? Because staff has said they're comfortable going forward with everything except what's in yellow.
Well, I think that's my question. How do we differentiate between a JC Park project and some of the other projects that are on the list, and why? I'd love to hear from the staff the difference between orange and yellow at this point in time, given that many of the yellow projects are maintenance projects and also have great COVID outdoor social distancing benefits as well. And I know, so I guess I just wanted to understand some of the logic behind that.
Sure. I can begin to speak to that, and I'll ask April or Gail to chime in as appropriate. The first look at this list obviously started with where we were in the year in our capital projects, what we had started, what we hadn't started, where we were in the line of those projects. So that was kind of the first, blush. Then we kind of looked at it from a perspective of, where we saw the staff time needed to continue with these projects, and then the necessity of them. Some of them, and you could, to your point, make arguments in many different directions on any of these, whether they're a need, a want, or I guess need or want, or maybe even a maintenance repair item. So, when we looked at this, we were very conscious of the fact that we were at the time really still just entering into this really unprecedented time for us with this pandemic, with so much unknown. And I think we understood and heard the concerns of the board, and we shared the concerns of, while this might not have an impact on our operating budget, we felt the responsibility to protect as much as we could as far as not spending money that we don't have available, or money that we may not have available in the future. So what projects are we in a position to postpone for various reasons, whether we haven't started them, whether they're not as crucial, or if they're, we just would have trouble with the staffing, so that we could reprioritize those dollars if needed at a later date. And so that was a lot of the initial thought process behind that when it came to the yellow projects. I think that some of them are just, timing challenges at this point, and I'll just use the example because it's come up. At this point with the JC project and where we're at with that and this time of the year, it might pose a challenge for me to actually complete that project right now. So I'm not so sure that going forward with that project would net a completed project by the end of the year. Doesn't mean it might not still be valuable to go after, but those were some of the things that we looked at when I sensed the desire of the board to find how much capital do we think we could postpone. And you're absolutely right. A lot of these things are just deferments. They're going to need to get done at a later date.
Right. I have a question, just so I'm clear on things. So when you initially in April, or actually maybe it was even in March, started working on what we were going to postpone, you didn't, I don't think you took into consideration what our actual, you just were like, here, we can stop this. These are things where I might not have the right staffing anyway, and the criteria that you just used, but you didn't use that we have, a much smaller pool. We have $3.8 million, if I'm reading Sandra's information, $3.8 million money, 1.9 of it is already committed. So we have 1.9 million left for all the rest of these projects. Is my understanding of that correct, first of all? I'm not asking, I mean, just from, if I'm understanding I want to make sure I'm understanding Sandra's eloquent letter, but,
So yeah, that's right. But some of the, the revenue projections in the capital fund have been adjusted, to make some assumptions.
Right.
As well. So
that's fair, but you would have done that in any budget we did that in October or November to figure out what our budget was going to be anyway. You made certain projections.
Right.
These ones are maybe a different set of projections, but you still, you had to do something because you have to have you're trying to create a budget. You have to make assumptions.
Right.
Okay.
So I think the other thing I'd add is that the board gave us consensus on the projects in yellow. So, I mean, obviously we can go back and talk about whatever we want, but that's where we got to the point of changing the budget based on the consensus that was given to the board by the board when this was presented. So I think if we're going to go through and change those, that would require and offer up different projects. I mean, the ones that aren't highlighted are either completed or they're in progress or they're safety, right? So we would not change our minds on the ones that are not highlighted at all, right? But if the board has consensus that you want Terry and his team of one to start, and I think that, Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, and I think you just you said the same thing, that these projects were considered based on your available staff as well at the time that we did that. And so when he's offering up these ones in orange, there's some different reasoning, you know, that we may consider those versus something else, you know, pulling something, you know, we're not saying we want to add anything else to complete, meaning we don't want to pull something off like JC tennis courts unless, you know, we're just offering more projects if we need to. We think Terry thinks his staff can complete all of the projects that we've left on, and then the ones in orange as well, barring any, you know, other unusual circumstances. Is that right, Terry?
Yes, that's correct. The one, you know, caveat being that master plan for Hinckley, we know
Right.
that, you know, the grant funding's not available this year, the timing of that, but it doesn't preclude us from continuing on with that planning process should we decide that makes sense for us, because more time to plan would be beneficial for that project. So it just, you know, that would be the one standout from that would be a little bit challenging, but otherwise we do have the staffing at current levels to complete, just as Gail said.
And just to update the board on that, that was some information I should have reported on that in my update, but we just got word that there will be no grant cycle for the 2021 cycle, which is what we would have had to apply Hinckley. That was part of the finance plan that we were counting on a OSLA development grant of 400,000. So that's another reason that we would offer, you know, to me, that would be the logical one to offer up to delay until, you know, January, and then reassess it when we, like Sandra said, turn in the new budget. The other one could be Emerson Lights. We're not moving forward with that unless, you know, there is approval on that project, which hasn't happened, and that has come from Niles, and that the soccer is also reimbursing that completely. So to me, that one is just, that's a wash. And then, you know, the other baseball renovations, tree inventory, those are up for, you know, discussion as well. So I don't know how you want to go about this.
Well, that's what I'm kind of trying to figure out myself. It's how we go about this.
Can I just add one more thing? I guess from an overall picture, I feel like, you know, because our revenues have for the capital fund are expected to be down approximately 500,000, 250,000 from 2019, and about that amount for 2020. Because at this point, I'm not prepared to project that we will have a surplus to transfer. So considering that, we've identified here about 1.5 million, 1.9 million, including the Emerson Field Lights project that we're putting on hold. I feel that gives us a comfortable position to reassess as we're working through the 2021 budget process to bring our recommendation on, you know, what those priorities should be in 2021 going forward. I think it gives us a comfortable enough projected ending fund balance and the time to go through the process, you know, with everyone. and looking forward at our capital asset replacement plan over the next several years, as we always do.
So, given the update on Hinckley and, that master plan being contingent upon a grant cycle and potential application, it sounds like it makes sense to me not to move forward with that right now if we're not even going to have the dollars to do the project next year by nature of where we are in planning and what we were counting on for some additional dollars for that project.
I would agree with that. And just to be clear, that 400,000 was just a portion of it. But,
Right.
it is a big chunk. So I would agree. I think that would make sense to postpone that one as well.
It seems sensible. I agree with Commissioner Harrington on the Hinckley master plan. Moving that to yellow.
I think we need 2 more people for
I'm on board with that as well. I think that's
Okay.
probably a smart idea.
I'll be number 2, Cindy.
okay.
For the others, based upon the staff's recommendation, the other in orange, based upon the staff's recommendation that there is adequate staffing and dollars in the capital fund to move forward and completing, does the board feel comfortable moving ahead in the short term with those orange projects? But for Emerson Light, I think we should take that off the list, but that's a
I agree.
discussion for another day.
Yeah,
Until we have a greater.
right.
It's not included in the
Right.
projections, actually. It's been removed from
Okay.
the revenue and the expense
All
in
right.
the projections.
Yeah, it was a wash anyway, right? So,
I think the question was, what was your question, Herbie?
If there is consensus on moving forward based upon staff's input and recommendation that there's reasonable staffing and capital dollars to complete the orange projects, that we
Right.
move ahead with those and remain postponed on the yellow.
Yes, I would say yes.
I would agree with that.
This is Commissioner Tunnel. I would agree with that too. And Terry, just really fast, I'm sorry, I just had a real quick question on JC Park, the basketball courts there. The $99,000, that included the tennis courts too, just to clarify, right? To resurface the basketball and tennis courts at the same time?
Yes, that's correct.
Gotcha. Just out of curiosity, is that a project that could be pieced just the basketball court part or no? I know that that's going to get some pretty heavy use this summer, so just curious about that.
It could for sure. The project in and of itself was to grind and overlay those. It wasn't a full depth renovation like we did at Hinckley because that was cost prohibitive. So this was meant to extend those for a number of years, a good eight plus years, and to kind of start to stagger out our capital expenses as it relates to our sports courts and asphalt surfaces we have across the park district. We could do it, but that area would be so small, it might become a little more cost prohibitive to do just the basketball court. It would also take it out of play for several weeks to months during the middle of this season if we move forward with that project right now.
All right, so I'll scrap that. So thanks for the input. I appreciate that. It seems like it could be more work than it is, and that amenity in itself has been, limited use as it was, and I'd hate to see another, say it's 7 weeks, so there goes the whole season for some people to play. So thanks for helping me understand that.
Yeah, no problem. It's always a challenge. It's like we want to do things and build things and renovate things, but those usually have to happen in the warm, nice months when people want to use them too. It's hard to not cross over sometimes, but no problem.
I wanted to be a professional dancer. size 14 feet get in my way. So sorry. Thanks, Terry.
I'll pay for the classes if you videotape them. Okay, so do we have any other commissioners who would like to comment on Commissioner Harrington's sort of proposal here for moving forward? Did we hear? We heard from 4, did we not?
We heard from Commissioner Grau, Leduc, and Tunnel for moving forward with those projects in orange. Did I miss one?
I didn't wait.
Harrington.
Okay, Harmony Hearing. Okay, Harmony.
Yeah, Commissioner O'Donnell hadn't weighed in, and I'm okay with it.
All right.
So we have consensus on that, and that should give you some guidance on where you want to move forward, Terry. So hopefully we can get everything going quickly and see where we go from there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, back to
have an approval. We'll be looking for an approval on the bidding for the nature classroom at one of the August meetings then. So,
okay. Commissioner Harrington, you have the floor.
Thank you. Before we move on, I just want to add a personal note in that I'm very concerned about any potential deferment of maintenance projects. And so when we do start our budget process, I ask that we utilize those in yellow as the starting point.
Thank you. I think that's exactly what we would do, and I share that concern as well. So thank you.
Great. And now I turn it over to Commissioner Grau for the recreation report.
Well, thank you. April's ready.
I'm ready. So my report is immediately after the finance report. The numbers that you see are from Friday. I do have a few updates for you. We're still holding around 50 as the participation number for our day camps in person. So we are planning on consolidating to Main Park as one location. The smaller time frame classes definitely seem to be more popular, so we're looking to add more options as the summer goes along. We did have virtual camps start this week, as well as some in-person programming. Our mini sports camp at Hinckley has been very popular. We also had our trivia night this week that was held for 7 families. And our outdoor fitness classes, as was previously mentioned, started this week, and a good majority of them are running. We've had to cancel, I think, 4 so far, but that was out of 24 being offered. So we'll see what the next few days brings. Our lap swimming also started this week. That's gone very well. So far, we have 187 out of the 200 available time slots filled. We've only had, I think, 20 out of the 100 spots available for the therapy pool. So we're looking into the possibility of making some time slots available in the future for private swim lessons in that pool. The ice rink continues to do very well, and the driving range remains very busy. The weather has certainly cooperated on that end. Our junior golf camp, since reported on Friday, we have had over 40 on the wait list since Friday. So staff is working towards making more time slots available, possibly in the morning or later in the summer, and we've already had people start transferring over to those time slots. So that was pretty exciting. And we are, as previously mentioned, working on the potential schedule options for both the indoor and Hinckley pool as we await guidance on phase 4. So we can have a few options ready and available. So we'll be working through those starting tomorrow. And we're getting staff onboarded and trained for the summer season for the classes that we do have running. As you can see in my board report, we continue to get new households based on some of this virtual programming. Definitely, that's exciting. And our Beyond the Bell registration is continuing since we last met. That participation is always very popular. And, you know, we just since Friday have had more enrollment in so many of these things, you know, as people are wanting to get back out and a little more comfortable with some of these smaller class options and the shorter time frames. I would be happy to answer any questions about the board report or any of the things that are happening since last week.
I do have a question.
Sure.
What have we heard about schools opening in the fall or in August?
It's really still, you know, they're weighing their options and coming up with different scenarios as well. They're still, as far as I know, in a holding pattern and considering option A, B, C, D.
Yeah,
And
I spoke to somebody over there as well, and they said the same thing. They're just looking at all the different options right now.
And is our stress scenario taking into account a big hit at Beyond the Bell?
It's taking into account, I believe, 50% of program, 50% of what we projected. What that number is, I can't tell you at this moment, but we could find it for you. But so the projections, and some, April or Sandra, correct me if I'm wrong, the projections we made once, you know, the pandemic hit, we're saying 50% of those redone projections, so not the original numbers, right? So 50% of the projections is what we are putting in the stress case. Is that correct, April? Do you remember, Sandra?
So
Sandra.
that's Sandra. What we did there, we used 50% of our new budgets for the summer, but for the fall, so we did not get granular, that granular by program. But our estimate for the months of September through December for fees and admissions, rental income, and all program fees were 32.5% of the budget.
Okay.
So I think it's
of our original budget.
Correct.
Okay, right.
So less than a third of our original budget.
Thank you. Other questions?
Were we going to discuss tonight the letter about non-residents and the lap swim?
We can, if you'd like.
I don't know.
Was that in the packet?
Is that appropriate to bring up, or is that something that needs to go on the agenda for the next meeting? Well, let me ask this question. But did you say right now it's under capacity, Superintendent Armour? We haven't sold out all the slots?
At the lap swimming at the indoor pool?
Yes.
Correct.
So, I mean, what is the feeling? If we found that we really had high demand and we sold out all those slots, that we would want to restrict it to. Do you know what the of what you have filled? Do you know what the split is between residents and non-residents?
I do not.
I don't even know if they're tracking that right because it's a daily fee. Or are they?
No, they're going through their household, so we could certainly look it up.
Well, all right.
I think the issue with that indoor pool, Commissioner O'Donnell, is that, you know, we spent a lot of time with the proposal for that facility in general, that we are trying to attract non-residents to make sure that we are, you know, taking care of the residents by financially being able to, you know, have the best outlook, right? And so to switch back from that philosophy for this interim, I think would be a hard thing on the people that we've been trying to recruit as members that are non-residents. I think that's the biggest issue. Now, if we were seeing a huge wait list, I think that we would probably have that discussion. And April, feel free to jump in to what I just said.
Yes, that's accurate. And as the board may remember, it's been very challenging since there's been so many fitness centers opening in the competing immediate area. And that's been a big push for us. And I understand that some residents are perhaps not as pleased that occurred, but that's what's been keeping our business going. And we've definitely seen a jump in our membership since we've been making that push prior to this shutdown.
Taking that into account, based on everything you just said, if it were to sell out, it would be a capacity issue. As it is right now, as I understand it, anybody that wanted to make a reservation and pay their money could do it. Would we then give preference to members, whether they're residents or not residents?
That's our intent once we move to phase 4, depending on what the capacity ends up being. We're looking at 2 options there as well, between a reservation system and just a drop-in if we end up getting a larger capacity allowance in phase 4. But we've always considered targeting our members first and foremost, because they have been loyal to the facility and had their membership prior to all of this occurring. So if we have the capacity, what we're discussing at this point is allowing the membership first, and then having drop-in for non-members if space allows.
And I think that, go ahead.
I think that's a very logical jump from the way that your membership policy is for the fitness center in general to sort of carry that over and so we've already assumed that non-residents can be members. So now it's just a matter of whether members had priority for the access to their pool that they've actually been paying for. So I like the way that if that can happen, that's right. I think that's the right way for it to happen.
And right now it's just a very temporary business plan model to, once we knew we were allowed to open the indoor pool, it's just to be able to get the people in there. So it's what we're doing at the moment is very temporary.
And I think that the other thing I just wanted to add in there is that, our goal is always to take care of the residents first. But we do have some, scenarios like we just explained for the fitness center. And then the other nuance that we have once Hinckley comes into play, and it was in one of the presentations, but there was so much information in there. So I'll just remind the board that Hinckley was part of an OSLAD grant. And so you cannot restrict, that's part of the stipulations in the OSLAD grants is that you have to provide access to non-residents. You can charge a higher fee, and you can, take registration first from residents. And that's what we'll plan to do in that case. And that is the same case at the Prospect Park Splash Pad. So as we move forward, that's something to remember there. At Centennial, we did not use grant funding for the Centennial pool. So we would not have had that issue. We could have said, yes, that's just for residents only. And we may have said that at that point.
So just one other question on an unrelated subject, and Director Mountcastle, I had asked you and you weren't sure at the time, but maybe there's further thinking on it. If we're going to be able to have an accommodation for the seniors at Hinckley, a time slot for them. I get actively asked by some of those folks. So.
They love that, and we know it's such a great thing for the seniors, right? And I think it's a matter of, and I know they're working on the schedule still. And April is nodding her head. I haven't heard from the last couple of days if they've perfected the schedule or whatever. But I think it's because there's such, with such a limited time for one outdoor pool that only serves 300 people at a time. I think that. I don't know where we're at with that. I know that they understand the requests and the desire.
Yeah, we're trying to at least have an option for 2 days to have that time slot, and it most likely will not be at the same rate that they're accustomed to, but we're certainly listening and trying to work that into the schedule. We're also polling some of the parents who have been in swim lessons in the past to gauge that interest. You know, working with the fitness center team to understand what their needs might be for aqua fitness, because we've heard from that group as well. So it's definitely challenging to try and fit in all the needs. And if there is an opportunity for us to allow for open swim, that's also going to, you know, it's going to minimize what we're going to be able to offer. But we're trying to at least have a few days of the senior swim time available.
Okay, I understand. Allocation of scarce resources is tough. I get it.
Yes.
Yeah, there's going to be a very high demand, as we've already heard from many different organizations
Group.
who are wanting to rent and use our facilities. I mean, it's a good problem to have, but very challenging.
And the one senior that I had talked to and responded to as well, I had asked her, and I believe you were on that correspondence, Commissioner O'Donnell, that are you willing to pay, you know, an additional fee? And she said yes, you know, that they understood the issue. So that was great.
Yeah, I thought so
Well,
too.
they're locked out of the activity center too, so it's a shrinking world for them. In that vein, we did also get an email about using the high school pools. Is that anything that's even possible?
We haven't explored that at all. I would guess no. I mean, you know, I know that do 64, you know, that was not an option, but no, we have not explored 207. But I think that gets back to a financial issue, is that it's, you know, we would have to come back and show the board that's a lap swim or maybe a swim team only, pool, maybe aqua aerobics, but the financials are not going to look good.
Right. And we pay a rental fee to use that facility. And so it might just be that some of the renters who are interested might want to pay that rental fee directly to the school district if we can't accommodate it. I'm not, you know, that's
right, that they could maybe go straight to the school district, because we would be paying them.
But the school district isn't going to open up the pools in the middle of the summer when they're having their own budget problem because of COVID-19 and are under the same restrictions, and maybe even different restrictions than we are for that.
Right. And it's just, we've all got to remember that open swim is not allowed right now, right? So that was one of the big factors with Centennial, not opening Centennials, because we couldn't have open swim. They could change it, you know, tomorrow.
Right. But the lat up Y swimmers, that would be, you know, a swim team type situation. And I'm surprised. Oh, hopefully they're going to the high schools also.
I think they're talking to everyone from what I understand. And I know there's a big demand for a lot of the swim clubs because, you know, a lot of the park districts aren't opening any aquatics. Some are opening limited like we are, and some are still undecided. So I would imagine they're going to all of the surrounding park districts. Des Plaines is opening the park district is opening a new 8-lane competitive swim pool. So I'm sure that, you know, hopefully they will be able to accommodate some of the swimmers as well.
Any other questions? Yeah? No? Okay. All right. All right. I'll turn it over to Commissioner O'Donnell.
Okay, and if he's not too worn out from our capital discussion, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Wolf.
Thank you. My board report begins on page 39 of the PDF, or 38 if you've got a paper copy in front of you. I would be happy to answer any questions or any highlights that I have here.
Any questions for Superintendent Wolf?
I want that water reel at my house. How much is it worth?
I'm not sure, but I can let you know when it goes up for the auction site and you can bid on it.
Okay.
Anything else?
Terry, I have a comment real
Go
quick.
ahead, Commissioner Tom.
I just want to thank the limited crew that you guys have been working with. I know there's been a lot of hard work and rearranging things and going from one place to the next. I know I just really appreciate all the hard work and efforts, everybody. I see the guys working when I go to work, when I get home from work, I see the men and women of the Park District working hard. So just pass on the thanks from me and the board, because I know you guys have been, it's been crazy for everyone, especially for the hardworking staff out there. So tell them thank you.
Thank you. I will do that.
Yes, I would concur, and I sometimes forget to thank everybody. Superintendent Wolf and his staff have been on site, diligent, very short staffed at the beginning. We've got a lot of the crews back, but we're still working without a lot of the part-time staff and short of the full-time staff too. So they've been doing an incredible job. So I would concur with that as well.
Thank you. We'll make sure to.
Commissioner LeDuc, did you have a question?
Oh, I just did. I was looking at the damage report at the bottom of page 39. And I guess I was curious, was there any footage of the vandals? And then I saw that it was $0 listed for Woodland. So I was just kind of curious about that.
Sure. I felt it was appropriate to show that we had damage reported and that we had a porta potty that had to get replaced, but we do pay the damage waivers on the porta potties. After several of them were damaged a few years ago, we found that it made sense financially for us to do that. So it had no out-of-pocket costs at this time. The damage waivers are built into our monthly expenses that we've already pay anyway. So.
And was there any, just curious, for either the basketball hoop or the porta potty, was there any footage of the perpetrators?
We don't have cameras at those locations, so there's none.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Superintendent Wolf? Okay, hearing none, I move on to this motion here. It's regarding the adoption of ordinance 20-4 disposal of surplus property. And I move to adopt ordinance 20-4, an ordinance authorizing the sale of used property owned by the Park Ridge Park District. This action will be formally ratified in an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date. Do I hear a second?
Second.
And is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mary Ann, please call the roll.
Commissioner LeDuc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell, Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so I believe we've covered this next agenda item, the postponed capital projects. Is this to your satisfaction, President Coyne? Yes?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And also to you, Commissioner Harrington? We've beaten that one to death?
We have.
Okay.
It's a dead horse now.
All right, great. So then I yield the floor to Commissioner Tunnell.
I'd like
We
to
still can't
welcome
hear you.
everyone to
There we go. Now we got you.
the policy, and then I'd like to have President Coyne talk about the at-hand motion, please.
Okay, so I didn't hear much of that. Did you just turn the floor over to me to make a motion?
Yes, sir. Sorry,
Okay,
I don't
thank you.
know what's going on here.
Okay. I move that the park board create a diversity inclusion task force. This action will be formally ratified at an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date.
Second.
Discussion. I'll just point out that I'll lead that off a little bit and just give you some background. Obviously, you all know what the events that have been happening around our country. Some local, some very local. And I think at the suggestion of Commissioner Tunnell, Commissioner Harrington, and others, that we should take a review of our policy on diversity and inclusion, kind of with an eye towards how we interact with our patrons, how we interact with our employees, and if we're doing everything at best practices with regards to diversity issues facing the park district. So that's where we came from, and I thought it was a perfect time to do that, and so we're doing it. Other discussion, any comments? None? Then I guess I give another step here. I move to appoint.
Actually, let me do the roll call first.
Oh, we have to do the roll call on the first one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Call the
Commissioner
roll.
Leach,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner LeDuc,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne.
Aye. Thank you. And I now move to appoint Commissioner Tunnell as chair of the Diversity Inclusion Task Force and Commissioner LeDuc as co-chair of the Diversity Inclusion Task Force. This action will be formally ratified in an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date.
A second?
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner LeDuc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, technically, Commissioner Tunnell still has the floor. So any other policy issues, John?
No, I think it's a really good thing for us to take a look at, and I'm honored to do this for the board and for the park district along with Commissioner LeDuc. I know that her wisdom and guidance will definitely help out. So I look really forward to working on this project and report back soon. So I apologize, I'm having some difficulties tonight, but in the next moment of the agenda, I turn the floor over to the Intergovernmental Liaison, Commissioner LeDuc.
Thank you. And I echo similar sentiments towards you regarding the diversity and inclusion task force. As far as intergovernmental goes, little shout out, thank you, President Coyne, for looping me in. There will be an intergovernmental Zoom meeting June 24th with Mayor Marty Maloney, Rick Biaggi, Paula Bessler, I believe, somebody else too. Sorry, I can't recall off the top of my head, but so there will be an upcoming intergovernmental powwow to report back to next time.
Where do we find out about that date and time, the time and how to attend?
You know, I can reach out to Marty and ask him if there's going to be a public link.
Yep. This is not a, this is not required, and it's up to Marty to do this. He called the meeting together and Commissioner Leduc didn't really know that, and I think she asked the question but didn't get an answer yet because this all happened today. The purpose of this meeting was strictly really to talk about the COVID-19 issues and how they're affecting our various boards, and to see if there's any way for that to come forth. So that's where that came from.
All right. And with that, I guess turn it over for communications and correspondence.
Are there any communications and correspondence? I guess that's my job to ask that.
There was the one communication in the packet, I believe, that everybody saw that was read into the minutes, I believe, from the last meeting, or it's part of the minutes because it was brought to us at the last meeting. And I think I mentioned the other correspondence that there's been a couple back and forth about the pool that I've been responding to, and President Coyne has also been responding to, that we've already discussed.
Any questions, comments on that? Hearing none, is there any new business? Hearing none, I move to adjourn the meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Tunnel,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Mr. Harrington,
Yes?
Mr. Leduc,
Yes.
Mr. Leach,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Even though I love spending time with you all in this time of isolation, I vote yes.
Commissioner Coyne,
And we would have been out before 9 if Commissioner O'Donnell hadn't pontificated on why he was voting his way. And I vote yes.
But you pontificated on his pontification. Now, we've never had to do roll call on that. Do we have to do roll call on everything?
Yes.
right now this is part of the bill 2135 that was passed by the governor.
Interesting.
So we are adjourned.
We are adjourned.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
everybody.
Have a good night.
Yep, good night.